All right, today we're going to talk a little bit about overcoming objections. In our last session, we talked quite a bit about fear energy. We talked about assumptive closes. We talked about rejection. But we know that objections are going to happen, right? That's part of that sales process. There's a comedian that I like, which is great quote, which is an objection is not a rejection. It is simply a request for more information. You've heard me say quite a bit. Our job is to help people make an informed decision. So when they're objecting to something that you said or something that you want to do, it's not a rejection. They're not rejecting you. They're simply saying, I need more information to make an informed decision. That's our job. That's our goal, is to help people make informed decisions, right? We get a lot of no, 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 no in our daily lives, right? Our goal is to get at the yes, right? We get so many no's. We get no, 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 not interested. No, no, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. We need to move past the no's and seek the yes. That's the only thing that we want, right? We're going to get far more no's than yeses. But if we're prepared for the no's, which you should be. You should prepare for the no. You should already have in your game plan when you start your prospecting for that day, I'm only going to allow X amount of no's. I need to get this many yeses, or only focus on a number of yeses that you need. So if you said, I'm going to go out and get 2 appointments today, whether that was through phone calling, door knocking, hosting an event, whatever you did, an open house, right? That's your sole focus. So if it takes you 6 phone calls to get 2 yeses for appointments, then you've set your goal. You've reached your goal. If it takes you 10 phone calls to get 2 yeses for appointments, you've reached your goal. Same with door knocking. If you said, I want to be able to get in front of 3 people today who want to talk about my product and service, if you had to knock 50 doors to get there, great. If you had to knock 20 doors to get there, even better, right? Focus on the outcome, not the activity, okay? So our learning objectives for today is to identify the objection, acknowledge and accept the objection, create the commitment, create explicit action. In other words, how do we solve the problem? And our outcome should be, how do we learn to handle objections? Okay. Again, an objection is not a rejection. It is simply a request for more information. All we do is help people make informed decisions. So our first and foremost job is to listen. Make sure we're actually hearing what's being asked of us before we create a response, okay? Before we can act on any objection, we have to make sure we properly understand what they're actually saying and the thought and the emotion that's behind the words that we're hearing, okay? Listening is key. It's crucial. We listen and then we listen some more. We ask questions to elicit the background and the detail of the objection. So it's not only the objection, but that we're understanding the emotion. We read between the lines, right? Sometimes they're not stating, I feel uncomfortable about money, even though they may be giving you overarching clues that it's about money, okay? The objection is stated may well cover the real objection, but we want the detail. We want to be able to make sure that we can help them to overcome what their blockade or barrier is, okay? We need to find out whether there are other objections, right? We want to make sure we're asking questions. Is there anything else other than this thing that's preventing you from moving forward? Because you don't want to move forward in the process and then find out there's something else that's holding them back, right? We want to be able to accept, once they've discovered the objection, what the next stage is to acknowledge not only the objection, but the person as well. Earlier, I mentioned the more that we can acknowledge the person and accept what they have to say, the more they feel validated. And that creates a level of trust between you and them because they feel heard, okay? We need to accept the person and that the objection is valid for them, even though we know objections are 100% irrational. That gives us an opportunity to work through it. In our last session, we talked about fear energy and how to convert that fear energy. keep in mind that customer that you're working with is also going through a process of fear, because it's the process of change and commitment. And we all know how overwhelming that is, right? Okay. By accepting the person, you are building their trust. Again, when we can accept them and what that objection is and help them to move forward, you're creating trust. You're creating an exchange of a dynamic emotion between you and them, and they're wanting to move forward and accept you because they feel heard. More importantly, they'll feel respected by you. Okay. So again, accepting the objection means understanding how it's reasonable, at least from their current viewpoint, and it allows them to object in a way that you may feel is an excellent offer. So when we're accepting the objection, we're letting them know we understand how they're feeling, but we're still moving them forward so that they can make the best decision for themselves. Okay. We also talk about the commitment. That's when we're getting serious. Is with the increased understanding and trust, you now have an ideal opportunity for a trial close. Remember when we went through that trial close? I know it's $800,000. How are we feeling about that? That kind of thing. Get a commitment from them such in a way that you can satisfactorily address any of the other objections. Okay. They will agree with you, and then they'll want to make the purchase, or they'll want to list with you. Again, we're always asking for the commitment. Okay. Always asking for the commitment. Persuasion is often an exchange, and you'll always be at liberty to back out, right? We're always persuading or influencing someone else, but we're also saying, look, I understand you may be fearful of this commitment. If this doesn't feel comfortable for you in the long term, after I've presented all this and you've had an opportunity to make an informed decision, we don't have to move forward. But the goal is always to get them to move forward. Keep in mind, they were willing to meet you and they know what you do. So because they were willing to meet you and because they know what you do, they have a clear plan and a clear path and a direction of what they want to do. You're just helping them to revalidate what that is. Okay. When we talk about explicit action, there are two types of an objection. There's the real ones and the accidental ones. Okay. Accidental objections are where the objection is due to a misunderstanding. That happens frequently. Well, Mr. Agent, you said that this thing was going to be this thing. That's a misunderstanding. And misunderstandings are an easy thing to address. Sometimes it's just a mere apology or an explanation. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, my apologies, I misspoke. What I meant when I shared this thing was, whatever that thing is, okay? Real objections take work. We've talked about this before. But again, they can be resolved. And if they can be resolved, then you know that you're moving forward with the commitment, and that commitment usually equates to a sale, okay? Persuade your way through the objection means working to change the way that the customer views the objection. Okay. If it's, I really want to buy this house, but I wanted hardwood floors. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, or Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I understand, carpets can be a burden to keep clean, plus if you have pets and, they produce smells, but I understand that hardwood has come down in price, and there are all kinds of companies that are having sales on hardwood. What kind of hardwood would you put in this room if we were to remove all this carpet, right? So that's helping them to see the objection in a different way. The carpet isn't permanent. It can be removed, and now they can have the thing that they dream of. So helping them to understand or see it in a different way. And again, we talked about concession. I can lower the price. We can ask for these things. Is there any reason why we can't move forward if we're able to make these other things happen? Okay. Concession is a useful approach, especially if you're in a hurry and there's threat. It gives you, if you give an inch, they may want to take a mile, right? We all know that. Okay, I'll let you have this. Well, if you're willing to reduce it by this, maybe you're willing to reduce it by even more. So you have to be careful in how we do that. We always want to show the benefits of anything that we do, right? Our goal is to find the customer. We're showing them benefits. We're overcoming the objection. And finally, we're closing the sale. That's our goal. Those are the hurdles that we run into each and every day, okay? Let's show the benefits. And some techniques on how we handle objections are we give it back to them. That's called the Boomerang Method, right? They said they want a blue carpet. You want a blue you didn't want carpet. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you know that carpet can be removed, right? You know, carpet's an easy thing. Is there anything else that would prevent you from buying this house? That's what's called the Boomerang Method. You're giving that objection back to them. Sometimes it's what's called objection chunking, to where we're taking big pieces of information and we're taking it down to a lower viewpoint. Again, sometimes objections are so large that they can't really decipher what it is, right? Are we moving the big boulder first, or are we moving small pebbles? Okay. We talked about the conditional or trial close, closing a condition for their rejection, for their objection. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if I'm able to do this thing, are we able to move forward? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I'm able to do this thing, are we able to move forward? That's what's called a conditional close, right? It's removing the thing that they're saying is the hurdle and asking them, can we move forward from that point? When they're telling you no, don't be sad. Don't be melancholy about it. Be curious. So, what is it about carpet you don't like? You don't want to move forward with this house that you said has everything that you want, except for the fact that it has blue carpet? Why would that prevent you from buying this house, right? If I could overcome that, is there anything that, is there any other reason why we wouldn't buy this house? Okay. There's what's known as deflection. Sometimes you guys are doing this in your own relationships every single day. We avoid responding to the objection and we just let it pass. Excuse me. Sometimes deflection is a very useful tool because it allows us to come back to that objection later or never address it at all. Okay. Again, if you keep in mind, objections are 100% irrational, they'll forget about it too, and it'll never come up again. Remember that people are conditioned to say the things that they've heard. And so if we're able to deflect, okay? Feel, felt, found is a classic way of moving them forward or handling an objection. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I understand exactly how you feel. Some of my clients have felt that same way in the past, and they found when they did this particular thing that this thing happened. Feel, felt, found, okay? Sometimes we respond with humor. That helps to create or keep the tension down, and it creates a more relaxing path so that everybody can de-escalate, particularly when feelings are high. Earlier, we talked about making sure that we're hearing the person and we're acknowledging the objection because that maintains the trust. Don't ever laugh at something that somebody wants to do. They're feeling real emotion around that, even though it may be irrational. So always acknowledge it. And sometimes we can create a humorous situation to where it will diffuse that situation and continue to allow them to move forward. Okay. Justification is, a way of moving forward or handling objections because it allows us to say, is this rational or is this irrational? It gives the person presenting the objection a different viewpoint. Okay. And then, of course, there's the LARC message, which is the listen, acknowledge, assess, respond, confirm. We've been talking about that all along: listening, acknowledging the objection, assessing the situation, responding to that situation to see if there may be a resolution, and confirming that that was the only thing that's getting in the way. And then the layer message, which is listen, acknowledge, identify, and then reverse it. So the LARC layer message method is similar, but with layer, the listen, acknowledge, we've identified the objection, and we're giving it back to them. We're showing them how clearly irrational that is, and it shouldn't allow them to take away from the bigger picture. Okay. And then sometimes writing things down and crossing them out. So our brains are very fluid. They're very dynamic and they're constantly in motion. Sometimes when we externalize what our thoughts are and we put those things on paper, we're now able to manipulate that thing once it's on paper. It now becomes a real thing. It's no longer just something that sits in our head. We can give that piece of paper to someone else. We can line out those objections that we're talking about. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, these are all the things, or Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, these are all the things you love about this house. Okay. You love it's near the schools that you want your children to go to. You like the neighborhood. You like the size. You like the number of bedrooms. Whatever those things are. Now, you said the things you don't like are blue carpet. Do you plan on replacing, could we replace the carpet because the house has everything else? All right, let's go ahead and line this one out for now. Is there any other objections, right? It allows them to see it visually and make a better decision. Remember, our job is to help them make an informed decision, right? We can be proemptive. We can handle objections before they happen. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Can you tell I work with listings more than buyers? Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. I know it's $800,000, and I know it's a bit more than what you wanted to spend, right? That's a preemptive objection. Now you're able to list all the features and benefits that they actually wanted for the house. And typically, you know that you're usually within range, okay? It's okay to push back a bit. Again, if we know objections are irrational, we know that a lot of things that our customers will do are fear-based. We can start to help them identify the things that are fear-based by a little pushback. That allows them to move forward. Keep in mind, this is a normal occurrence, a normal experience, a day-to-day experience if you're working with buyers and sellers every day. So you should expect a bit of pushback. I know this is uncomfortable, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. I know this is uncomfortable, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. But you said that you wanted these things as an outcome. This is how we get there. Right? That's that little bit of pushback, okay? And it's healthy. And then sometimes we're just simply reframing. So let me make sure I understand. You're wanting to do these things, but you said that this is the thing that you want, right? Can we stay focused on this thing? You're reframing that objection to where you're creating a positive outcome for it. Okay. Sometimes we just change the name or the words around, right? Changing the words changes the meaning. Now it gets de-emphasized. Again, I can't stress enough, objections are almost 100% irrational. They are 100% irrational. So sometimes when we change the words, because we know that words have power, and sometimes people are fixated on the word and not the event behind the word, okay? We can also reprioritize. So sometimes we're pushing those objections that seem to have a lot of power down in the list. And when we can handle some of the smaller ones first, it tends to de-emphasize or de-escalate that big objection, like say something like price, okay? Again, talked about writing them down and crossing them off. Those are things that we can handle, okay? Some of the techniques when we're talking about the boomerang method is when people object, turn it around using what they say to prove the thing that they said is not correct. We're essentially using their own argument against them to circle back to a way that persuades them, okay? We're helping them to understand in this method how that objection that they're sharing with you is truly irrational. That's the boomerang method. Come on, you don't want to go into that room because of whatever, right? We talked about objection chunking, which is you can take the more higher, more general viewpoint or a more detailed focus. So chunking is also called helicoptering, and it lets you see more and helps you to understand the bigger picture more specifically. And then when you chunk it up, you're taking specific issues and making them seem smaller or less significant. And we've talked about that. Like if I was worried about a scratch in the car is nothing compared to world peace, right? So you're doing the same with a house. Blue carpet is nothing if we're talking about, but this is the neighborhood I want at the price I want, all those things. It allows you to expand the pie, showing them what they're actually getting, as opposed to the basic product, okay? You can add and subtract different things. So objection chunking is pretty powerful. It allows you to drill down into details, helping them to address the ones that really are causing them hesitation. Okay. It reduces the size of the objection overall. So that way they're seeing, what they're really looking at versus just kind of expressing the nervousness behind the objection itself. Okay. Again, we've talked about the conditional close. When the other person offers an objection, make it conditional. In other words, I can fix that thing. You can also use this approach to make any trade. For example, if you want them to watch a promotional video, offer them a cup of coffee. That's a conditional close. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here, go ahead. Let me give you a cup of coffee. I want you to spend 10 minutes and watch this thing, right? Conditional. Always, by the way, phrase it in the form of, if I will you, right? You're asking for that commitment. If I do this thing, will you do that thing? So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if I'm able to get you the price that you're looking for and get the home off the market in a timely manner, will you list with me? That's a conditional close, right? It's a psychological closure and on what you're offering, and it draws them into the close, okay? Because they feel like there's been some concession. So they feel like there's a win-win dynamic that was just created. The conditional close is the exchange principle, and it's a form of social engagement, which is how we interrelate as human beings. Okay. So definitely join me for part 2. Again, our goal is we are always 100% of the time wanting to stomp out the no in favor of the yes. Okay. As always, I appreciate you guys joining me. Thank you so much. I will see you next session. Let's put some of these tools into play. Okay. Thanks so much for your time.